The sun dipped below the tree line, casting long shadows that stretched across the forest floor. The golden hour had arrived, bathing everything in a warm, ethereal glow. It was a moment of serene beauty, where the world seemed to pause and take a breath. A warm glow painted the sky, blending hues of orange, pink, and purple. The colors seemed to dance and shift, creating a mesmerizing tapestry that captivated anyone who took the time to look up. It was as if the sky itself was putting on a show, a final performance before the curtain of night fell. The Miller family, all smiles, unpacked their car with a sense of excitement and anticipation. This was their annual escape from the hustle and bustle of everyday life, a chance to reconnect with nature and with each other. They had been looking forward to this trip for months, and now that it was finally here, they couldn't wait to get started. They were deep in Redwood National Park, surrounded by towering trees that seemed to touch the sky. The forest was alive with the sounds of birds chirping and leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. It was a place of tranquility and natural beauty, a perfect setting for their adventure. This was their annual escape, a tradition that had started years ago when John and Mary first fell in love with the great outdoors. They had passed that love on to their children, Sarah and David, who now looked forward to these trips as much as their parents did. It was a time to disconnect from technology and reconnect with each other. John Miller, the patriarch, loved the outdoors. He had grown up camping and hiking, and he wanted to share that passion with his family. There was something about being in nature that made him feel alive and at peace. It was a feeling he cherished and wanted his children to experience as well. His wife, Mary, enjoyed the peace it brought. She loved the quiet moments, the chance to sit and listen to the sounds of the forest. It was a welcome break from the noise and chaos of everyday life. She found solace in the simplicity of nature, and it helped her recharge and find balance. Their teenage children, Sarah and David, craved the freedom from technology. In a world where they were constantly connected, these trips offered a rare opportunity to unplug and just be. They could explore, play, and let their imaginations run wild. It was a freedom they didn't often get to experience, and they relished every moment of it. John hammered stakes into the soft earth, securing the tent that would be their home for the next few days. He worked with practiced ease, each movement precise and efficient. It was a task he had done countless times before, but it never lost its sense of purpose and satisfaction. The tent, a familiar green dome, slowly took shape. It was a symbol of their adventures, a constant in their ever-changing lives. As it stood tall and sturdy, it seemed to promise shelter and comfort, a safe haven in the heart of the wilderness. Mary organized supplies, humming a cheerful tune. She had a knack for making even the simplest tasks enjoyable, and her positive energy was infectious. As she arranged their gear, she thought about the meals they would cook, the stories they would share, and the memories they would create. Sarah, lost in a book, barely looked up. She loved to read, and the quiet of the forest provided the perfect backdrop for her literary adventures. As she turned the pages, she was transported to different worlds, her imagination fueled by the beauty and serenity around her. David, restless, tossed a baseball in the air. He was full of energy and always looking for something to do. The forest was his playground, a place where he could run, climb, and explore to his heart's content. He loved the sense of freedom it gave him, the chance to be wild and carefree. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. It was a smell that instantly brought a sense of calm and nostalgia. It reminded them of past trips, of nights spent under the stars and days filled with adventure. It was the smell of the forest, a scent that was both familiar and comforting. It was the perfect start to their adventure. The campsite was set up, the sun was setting, and the forest was alive with possibilities. They were ready to embrace whatever the next few days would bring, to make the most of their time together in this beautiful place. The last rays of sunlight faded, giving way to the soft glow of twilight. The forest took on a different character, one that was mysterious and enchanting. The shadows grew longer and the sounds of the night began to emerge. It was a time of transition, a moment of quiet reflection before the night fully took hold. Stars began to prick the darkening sky, tiny points of light that seemed to twinkle with a life of their own. The night sky was a canvas, and the stars were its paint, creating a masterpiece that was both awe-inspiring and humbling. It was a reminder of the vastness of the universe and their small place within it. John built a crackling fire, the flames leaping and dancing as they took hold. The fire provided warmth and light, a focal point for their evening. It was a ritual he loved, a way to bring everyone together and create a sense of community. As the fire grew, so did their sense of connection and belonging. The flames danced, casting flickering shadows on the surrounding trees. The light and shadows played together, creating a mesmerizing display that was both beautiful and haunting. It was a reminder of the power and beauty of nature, a dance that had been going on for millennia. Stories and laughter filled the air, the sound of their voices mingling with the crackle of the fire. They shared tales of past adventures, dreams for the future, and everything in between. It was a time of bonding, of strengthening the ties that held them together. In those moments, they were more than just a family. They were a team, united by their love for each other and for the outdoors. They roasted marshmallows, their faces lit by the fire's warm glow. The sweet, sticky treat was a favorite, a tradition that they looked forward to every year. As they watched the marshmallows turn golden brown, they felt a sense of contentment and joy. It was a simple pleasure, but one that brought them closer together. For a moment, all was right in their world. They were together, happy and at peace. The worries and stresses of everyday life seemed far away, replaced by the simple joys of being in nature and in each other's company. It was a moment they would cherish, a memory they would hold on to long after the trip was over. But the forest held its breath, a silent observer to their fleeting joy. It watched and waited, a timeless presence that had seen countless families come and go. It was a reminder that while their time here was temporary, the forest would endure, a constant in an ever-changing world. A log shifted in the fire, sending up a shower of bright sparks. The sudden noise startled Sarah, breaking her deep concentration. She glanced up from her book, her gaze drawn to the dark woods surrounding their campsite. The wind rustled through the leaves, creating a symphony of eerie whispers. It was a sound she'd heard countless times before, yet tonight it felt different, colder, more deliberate. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. David, lost in his own thoughts, shook his head dismissively. "Hear what?" "I thought I heard someone talking," Sarah said, her eyes scanning the darkness. John chuckled, throwing another log onto the fire. "It's just the wind, sweetheart. Don't let your imagination run wild." Sarah nodded, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled over her. But the whispers persisted, growing louder with each gust of wind. They seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Whispers tinged with malice, whispers that sent shivers down her spine. The whispers intensified, morphing into distinct voices. They seemed to come from all directions, echoing through the dense forest, bouncing off the trees and creating an eerie symphony of fear. The air grew colder, and the once gentle rustling of leaves now sounded like sinister whispers plotting in the dark. Sarah could have sworn she heard her name being called, a low murmur that seemed to slither through the trees. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat louder than the last. As if trying to drown out the haunting sounds around her, she strained her ears, trying to catch the words, but they remained just out of reach, teasing her with their elusive nature. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her. It was a fear unlike any she had ever known, primal and instinctive, gripping her very soul. The fog that had settled in the forest seemed to thicken, wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket, making it hard to breathe. She felt as if the forest itself was alive, watching her, waiting for her to make a move. She shot to her feet, her eyes darting around the campsite. Every shadow seemed to move, every rustle of leaves a potential threat. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation, but all she could think about was the overwhelming urge to run, to escape the unseen terror that surrounded her. Her family, oblivious to her growing terror, continued their conversation. Laughter and casual chatter filled the air, a stark contrast to the fear that gripped Sarah. She wanted to scream, to warn them, but her voice seemed trapped in her throat, unable to break free. The normalcy of their actions only heightened her sense of isolation and dread. "Dad, I don't feel good," she stammered, her voice tight with fear. Her words were barely a whisper, but they carried the weight of her terror. She hoped that her father would understand, that he would see the fear in her eyes and take her seriously. But even as she spoke, she could see the skepticism in his eyes, the doubt that clouded his judgment. John finally noticed her distress. "What's wrong, honey?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. He reached out to touch her arm, hoping to offer some comfort, but the fear in her eyes made him hesitate. He had never seen her like this before, so scared, so vulnerable. It was as if the forest had awakened something deep within her, something that she couldn't control. "The voices," she whispered, her eyes wide with terror. "They're getting louder." David scoffed, dismissing her fears with a wave of his hand. He had always been the skeptic, the one who needed proof before he believed anything. But Sarah's fear was real, palpable, and it gnawed at him, making him question his own certainty. "There are no voices, Sarah. It's just the wind playing tricks on you," he said, trying to sound reassuring. But even as he spoke, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The forest seemed to close in around them, the shadows growing darker, more menacing. He glanced around, his eyes searching for any sign of danger, but all he saw were the familiar shapes of trees and bushes. But John wasn't so sure. He had noticed a change in the atmosphere, a subtle shift that sent a shiver down his spine. The air felt charged, as if it was alive with an unseen energy. He couldn't explain it, but he knew that something was out there, something that was watching them, waiting for the right moment to strike. He had noticed a change in the atmosphere, a subtle shift that sent a shiver down his spine. The once familiar forest now seemed alien, filled with unseen threats and hidden dangers. He could feel the weight of the darkness pressing down on him, making it hard to think, hard to breathe. He glanced at Sarah, her fear mirrored in his own eyes, and he knew that they had to get out of there. The air felt heavy, charged with an unseen energy. It was as if the forest itself was alive, watching them, waiting for the right moment to strike. The fog that had settled in the forest seemed to thicken, wrapping around them like a suffocating blanket, making it hard to breathe. Every sound, every movement seemed amplified, adding to the sense of impending doom. The shadows from the fire seemed to twist and contort, taking on menacing shapes that danced just beyond the reach of the light. They seemed to have a life of their own, moving in ways that defied logic and reason. Sarah watched in horror as the shadows grew larger, more defined, their shapes becoming more sinister with each passing moment. A sense of dread, primal and suffocating, began to claw its way up his throat. It was a fear that he couldn't explain, a fear that seemed to come from deep within his soul. He knew that they had to leave, that they had to get out of the forest before it was too late. But even as he thought this, he could feel the forest closing in around them, trapping them in its dark embrace. The forest floor seemed to buckle beneath their feet. Each step felt like treading on a living, breathing entity, the ground pulsating with an eerie rhythm. The leaves and branches shifted unnaturally, as if moved by an unseen force. It was as though the forest itself was alive, reacting to their presence with a malevolent intent. Trees swayed violently, though there was no wind. Their branches creaked and groaned, creating a symphony of unsettling sounds. The towering giants seemed to be communicating with each other, their movements synchronized in a dance of dread. The family could feel the weight of the forest's gaze upon them, an invisible pressure that made it hard to breathe. The fire sputtered, its cheerful light dimming to an eerie glow. Panic seized the family as the comforting warmth of the flames was replaced by a cold, unnatural chill. The shadows cast by the flickering fire seemed to stretch and twist, forming grotesque shapes that danced around them. The once familiar and safe campsite had transformed into a scene from a nightmare. They huddled together, their faces pale with fear, as the world around them dissolved into a chaotic swirl of darkness and sound. The forest was no longer just a backdrop. It had become an active participant in their terror. The cacophony of noises, whispers, rustling leaves, and distant howls grew louder, enveloping them in a suffocating embrace. Every rustle and snap of a twig sent shivers down their spines. "What's happening?" Mary cried, her voice cracking with terror. Her eyes darted around, searching for any sign of what was causing this madness. The fear in her voice was palpable, a raw and primal reaction to the unknown forces at play. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing the growing sense of dread that consumed her. John pulled his family close, his eyes frantically searching the darkness for an answer. He felt a surge of protectiveness, but also a deep, gnawing fear. The darkness seemed to close in around them, an impenetrable wall that offered no escape. He whispered reassurances to his children, though he himself was far from reassured. The forest had become a labyrinth of shadows and threats, each step forward fraught with danger, but there was nothing but the oppressive darkness and the cacophony of whispers, now a deafening roar that seemed to consume them whole. The whispers were no longer just background noise. They had become a tangible force, pressing in on them from all sides. The family felt as if they were being watched by countless unseen eyes, each whisper a reminder of their vulnerability. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the chaos ceased. The forest fell silent, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as if a switch had been flipped. The family stood in stunned silence, their ears ringing from the abrupt absence of sound. The stillness was almost as unnerving as the chaos had been, a stark contrast that left them disoriented and wary. They found themselves on a familiar trail, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. The familiar surroundings brought a momentary sense of relief, but the memory of the recent terror lingered. The trail, once a place of adventure and exploration, now felt like a fragile thread connecting them to safety. Each step forward was taken with caution, their senses heightened and alert. The trees stood tall and silent, their branches interwoven to form a dense canopy overhead. The sunlight barely penetrated the thick foliage, casting the forest floor in a perpetual twilight. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. It was as if the forest was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. It was as if the terrifying episode had never happened, but something was different. The air was charged with an electric tension, a sense of foreboding that was impossible to shake. The family exchanged worried glances, each of them feeling the same unspoken fear. The forest, though calm, seemed to be watching them, its silence a prelude to something unknown. The air was heavy with a suffocating sense of dread. Every breath felt labored, the weight of the atmosphere pressing down on them. The forest, once a place of beauty and tranquility, had transformed into a realm of shadows and fear. The family could feel the malevolent presence lurking just beyond their sight, an ever-present threat that kept them on edge. And the whispers, though fainter now, still lingered at the edge of their hearing. They were a constant reminder of the forest's grip, a haunting echo that refused to fade. The family strained to hear, hoping to catch a clue or a sign, but the whispers remained elusive, a ghostly presence that kept them in a state of perpetual unease. The forest's grip had tightened, and it was clear that it had no intention of letting go.